It's from different boards, and it's all over the map.
Oh, it's crazy what it is.
What you can and can't do, and what you want to do, and anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. All right. Hello, everyone.
What do you say?
Hey,
So Linda sounds like a pipe exploded in her basement. So I think she's going to hop on remotely. And we have Peter here. So we're running a little low on form at the moment.
I think Emily said she couldn't make it.
Yes.
So Phil, pull up.
All right. Phil is here too. So and we'll get him with the remote script in a second.
We got our old room back.
I think somebody just called me from Nantucket, which maybe that was Linda. I'm just going to call her back.
Give this to you. Linda is going to hop on remotely, it sounds like, because she has a plumber and an exploded pipe in her house, it sounds like.
So she can't run the meeting then?
She can when she shows
She's
up.
going to be a few minutes late, it sounds like.
Okay, so I'll just read the thing and
Yes, I think
get it started.
as long as we have one here. So we have
Okay.
2 here, Steve 3, Seth 4, Samantha's here. All right, we're good to go.
Yeah, and just I just talked to Linda and I'm sending her the Zoom link, so she should be on in a minute.
Perfect.
Okay, so shall I get started?
Yes, why don't you go ahead and call to order and we'll get going.
Okay. This is the Nantucket and Mattocket Harbor Plan Committee meeting, January 22nd, 2024. We're at the 131 Pleasant Street trailer, and we're using Zoom for this meeting, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. The chair can request that members of the public provide their names for purposes of keeping accurate minutes of the meeting. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can click the raise hand button if they wish to speak. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order they were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. My name is Phil Smith. I am the vice chair, acting as the chair until Linda Williams is able to join the meeting. Please confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Peter Brace.
Here.
Steve Lindbach.
here.
Dave Franzuto.
I'm in the
You have just
whoops.
Okay. No, no Dave Franzuto. We have Jesse Bell.
Present.
Okay. Seth
Here.
Emily Molden?
Nope.
No?
No.
Samantha?
Here.
Okay. And Roberto?
No, I was not able to make it today.
Were there any other members that I'm missing? Okay, staff, I'll try to do the best I can. Jeff Carlson.
Here.
Kristen.
Here.
Kim.
Here.
Jack.
Yeah.
Tara.
Present.
And Alan Bartels.
Here.
Is there anybody I'm missing?
Zach. Stewart.
Here, present.
Okay. Okay, do we have any other speakers, any guests?
Nope.
Okay, good afternoon. This open meeting of the Harbor Plan Update Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Ensuring public access does not ensure participation unless participation is required by law. The meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting is being convened by video conference via Zoom app posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference with the exception of 3 of us in person, Jeff Carlson, Peter Brace, and myself in the trailer. Also, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured for the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided, members of the body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, please permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone and computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait for the chair until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please don't do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged to speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. I think the first item on the agenda is to approve a set of minutes. Peter, do you want to say anything, or we're just, I think everybody has received the minutes.
What I want to say is that we get a little, you can be hung up on the minutes. And I looked at Robert's Rules of Orders again this afternoon, and it's really basic. No way do they have to be as crazy as I make them, but that's just how I do them. I looked at minutes from other boards and committees and commissions, and most of them are pretty, streamlined, cut down in terms of who we list, who's here. I've seen chair, vice chair, and then staff, and not everybody does. The people who show up. And I didn't see any examples of people listing who they were representing unless they specified. A lot of times in the minutes, somebody speaks, they say who they represent because the board asked them to do that. So we all know who it is. So then at that moment, you put it in there. So there you go.
Okay, so you have, we're voting on the minutes for October 2nd, October 16th, November 6th, December 4th, and January 8th. Is that correct?
No,
Okay. Does anybody have any comments on any of those minutes?
and I wanted to say that from your notes, Matt Effenrefer wasn't representing anybody. He said, I'm just here for myself.
Okay,
So, Bruce Mandel, Connecticut Conservation Association, Steve McKenna, Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management. And then all the staff members are listed under their respective, natural resources, Jeff Carlson, Tara Riley, and then all the urban harbors people. So
okay.
that's all I got.
I only had one comment, and it was on the January 8th minutes. I think it was on page 3. And there is it's sort of towards the bottom of that page. We were talking about the holding tank dye tablet program. And the minutes right now, or what we're voting on, says Mr. Smith said it doesn't seem the boat pumping out holding tanks that the harbor master oversees is really doing an adequate job. I would like to suggest we word it a little bit more softly and say something to the effect that it seems that the boat pumping out holding tanks that the harbor master oversees might be that the crew might be more available during their posted hours.
Okay.
Okay. Does anybody have any objections to that modification? With that, I guess, can we vote on the minutes? Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve as amended.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, Peter,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Seth,
Aye.
Emily, no, she's not here. Jesse,
Aye.
Samantha,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So the minutes are accepted and approved. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to finish discussing issues and recommendations, finishing natural resources. Kim, can I hand that over to you?
Yes, thank you. And yeah, we've basically, I think we've gone through pretty much the whole natural resources section. I just wanted to finish the last small bit here, and then we can move on to commercial waterfront with Jack. So let me share my screen really fast. We had stopped here and that we were looking at the 2009 plan and the objectives and recommendations and what to carry over. So we stopped here in terms of identifying critical natural resources associated with Nantucket and Mattocket harbors to better protect them, and talked about inventorying and mapping critical resources and open space areas, which generally it seems like that's something that's kind of ongoing and we need to keep working on. Anybody have any comment on that one? Okay, and I'll just quickly go through these next ones. I don't want to take up too much more time because we kind of have spent a lot of time on this, but next one is about protecting and restoring critical eelgrass resources, which seems still relevant and important, and talked about restoring eelgrass in coordination with the shellfish management plan. So generally keeping and then elaborating something about eelgrass resources, which we've talked about. The next one is reducing impacts on native natural resources and systems from invasive species. And that also is a keep. One question I guess I had was, there was a recommendation here about supporting and enhancing the Nantucket Biodiversity Initiative. Do we want to keep that in as a recommendation, change it at all, or elaborate on that? We do have it marked as complete, but I guess that is something that could just be ongoing.
I would think that's an ongoing exercise.
That's what I was going to say.
What's that?
That's what I was gonna say.
Okay. Great.
If we
And
were,
then,
we were gonna do anything with it, Seth would have spoken up.
yeah, I was looking towards Seth. I didn't see any movement, so. Great. Okay, managing and eradicating invasive species, which we're generally going to keep that and continue the existing culling program of the green and Asian crabs. So likely also keeping that. And then the last one was about marine mammals and marine mammal protection, public education. And wasn't sure if you guys thought that continuing to discuss marine mammals and marine mammal public education was important, or if that's something that, you know, you feel like is already happening and we don't need to push it that much.
I think it's happening through the two organizations that are out there rescuing marine mammals and being there for marine mammals on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that they're in classes telling people what's going on, but they certainly put an awful lot on social media telling you if you see a sea turtle or a seal or some other marine creature in distress to call them. So, and they also put educational materials out there now and again on social media. So I think they're kind of covering us.
Great.
I agree. I agree with Peter on that one. I think that that's pretty well taken care of and not necessarily needs to be in our update.
I agree. Anybody?
Seth?
Yeah, I agree too. And just I
Mhm.
think that singling out marine mammals as one taxa in the harbor plan doesn't really make sense since
Mhm.
there's a lot of other taxa. But could I make one comment about the culling program
Mhm.
for non-native crabs?
Mhm.
So I think that we should also say something about trying to make like to try to help scale that. So right now that's being done basically through the Nantucket Land and Water Council. You know, they're paying as a private nonprofit paying fishermen for that.
Mhm.
But it's at such a small scale and it's with the one species. And I think that if we could move towards like a market level adoption or a government adoption of that, we'd actually be able to have some impact. Right now, it's more like an educational impact rather than a conservation stewardship impact.
Great.
Just to add to that, the green crab, so it was a co-funded research grant and a co-funded, co-led research project on the trapping of them between the Land and Water Council and the Nantucket Shellfish Association.
Thank you, Samantha. Sorry, didn't mean to leave you out.
That's okay.
Okay, sorry about that. Linda said that there's sewage in her basement, so she can't make it.
And by the way, on the note of green crabs, I think a lot of the education of green crabs comes through the Land and Water Council, the Mariah
Mhm.
Mitchell partners when it comes to kids education. Um, the Nantucket Land and Water and the Mariah Mitchell do a
Mhm.
great job collaborating on the kids side of things where they do, the derby, the education, where it's Land and Water and Shellfish Association is where it's commercially trapping and composting. So there's kind of the like educational community, and then
Mhm.
there's the commercial side. Two different partners there.
Okay. Okay. Great. Anything else on that? All right. So thank you guys for spending so much time on natural resources. Obviously, it's really important. So I think we, got a lot of great information out of that exercise. And up next is Jack with, I think, Jack, did you want to start with commercial waterfront or
I think so, yeah. Yep.
Okay, great.
Can you put that up?
Oh, hang on. I can do that. Second. So commercial waterfront.
are with the matrix.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so as Kim had done with the natural resources, there are two documents. I think that they're both in the same file. One is the what we're looking at here, which is a sort of a redo of the matrix that we were all reviewing earlier on in this process. And we sort of reformatted it just for a couple of reasons, to make it a little bit simpler, and then to add some things, some text in there that isn't in the matrix, and that would be the goals and the objectives that are associated with the recommendation. So, as we go through this plan, we need to keep our eye on those goals and objectives too, and get your thoughts on whether they need to be kept, revised, or deleted. So just as the natural resources that Kim just did, what's in white here is what was in the matrix. Green is what you had written in as your committee comments, and the yellow is our further thoughts and comments on all of that. So start off with the commercial waterfront. And this section for the 2024 plan of commercial waterfront actually is drawing, in this matrix, is drawing from the commercial waterfront section of the plan, the harbor operations section of the plan, and the docks, wharves, and piers section of the 2009 plan. You'll see that as we go along, that these are pulled from several different sections of the 2009 plan. So the first was to begin with the first goal: preserve, promote, and support water-dependent uses of the harbor and the commercial waterfront. So I assume that that's a pretty solid goal. We would recommend keeping that. The objective under that goal: discourage displacement of existing water-dependent uses and activities, and then give highest priority to uses and activities that require access to coastal waters when making land use decisions on waterfront redevelopment. So basically all that's saying is that in the two commercial waterfront areas, one in downtown Nantucket and the other in Mattocket, in those areas that the plan is recommending that existing water-dependent uses not be displaced by another proposed use. And secondly, that water-dependent uses get highest priority. That was done in 2009 because that's what the community wanted. It also brought the plan, made it consistent with what Chapter 91 requires on commercial waterfront. So what we were doing, two things there, was we were creating the policy for Nantucket, and then we were making it consistent with what the state is requiring under Chapter 91. So under that objective, those first three recommendations really were creating a harbor overlay district in each of the commercial waterfronts, putting into that district the requirements that water-dependent uses have priority, and did a couple of other things. There were several water-dependent uses that the community didn't want to have DEP allow, and that was support services for cruise ships, and I think the other one was the rental of jet skis. So those are listed in the plan and in the regulations as uses that DEP would not be approving under Chapter 91. So all of that was done. The town meeting, actually shortly before this plan was adopted, town meeting adopted that harbor overlay district and the regulations that were associated with that. So as the committee noted, those are all completed. I talked to one of the town planners about this, what had been the experience with it. They suggested that they really didn't have a great deal of experience with it, but she said, we've had a few problems with it, but she wasn't familiar enough with those problems to tell me what it was. So, so as you say, those recommendations are completed and we can remove them from the plan, with the caveat that I'll try to talk to somebody in the planning and land use section of the town's planning office and see if they can give me some clarification of what issues arose when they were implementing the harbor overlay district, and we'll get back to you with whatever suggestions they might have for tweaking that. But otherwise, it seems like that's a good recommendation. Anybody have any comments on that? So we would keep the goal objective, remove those three recommendations. Fourth recommendation, adopt waterfront assessment policies that provide incentives for water dependent uses. In 2009, when we were talking about this, there was a lot of discussion around the country on blue lining waterfronts, which meant that just like the state has a tax assessment policy that provides for lower taxation on farmland and agricultural land and open space and forests. There was a thinking that one of the ways that we could incentivize people to keep their water dependent uses there or to lower the taxes on those uses. Now, that's never been adopted by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and has been, I think, much little focus on that. So your question was, is that complete? And somebody made the comment that it's not applicable anymore since we established the Harbor Overlay District. And I want to know what people think about that. But I don't think it's possible to do it anyway under state tax law. So we would suggest removing that.
So, Jeff, doesn't the Harbor Overlay District require that the ground floor is a water dependent use and then you can do what you want upstairs?
Yep. Right? Yep. And that's what Chapter 91 suggests as well.
So that's already taken care of then.
Yes.
We don't have to recommend anything or have incentives because it's a bylaw.
Right.
Okay.
Right. This is all in the attempt just to do as best we could to make sure that the commercial waterfront stayed that way. You can change use, but the priority use would be another water dependent use.
So we could remove recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4 then.
Yes.
I think that makes sense. Does anybody have a problem with that?
No.
Okay.
Okay. And the only caveat being that if the planning unit in Nantucket can come up with some suggestions to how we could tweak that, we would write something up that would address that. Recommendation 5, identify scenic views or characteristic of scenic views for the harbor landscape and waterscape to guide decision making. Some member of the committee that reviewed this said the land bank has and continues to buy property on Washington Street, and that's certainly a good thing. What this recommendation was about was that people felt that development on the waterfront might diminish the scenic views that were available from public roadways for people, and that when the community was approving new projects, they ought to know that. They ought to know which sites provided people with a scenic view of the waterfront, and therefore, when the town was approving a project, they might take that into consideration to try to preserve, to the extent possible, that scenic view. So while what the land bank has done is great, it doesn't exactly respond to that recommendation. I don't know if this has ever been done, whether anybody's gone around and determined where the public has a scenic view of the water from a public way. And I think we're talking about the commercial waterfronts here, not everywhere. And I made a note here that no one mentioned this in the public process. This didn't really come up again.
Jack, did you say no one's ever really gone down a public way and determined whether they like the view or not? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that was my question. That was what the recommendation was. I don't know if whether the town has done that or not.
The town has kind of done that. So the roads, like 10, 12 years ago, the Roads and Right of Way Committee went around and they found every single public way leading down to the water and went through the arduous process of clarifying those public ways, marking the boundaries and making sure that people knew that you could get to the water through those public ways, because there was a use for the public to go swimming, to launch a boat, to get a view. So it's kind of like the town has already done that, but they didn't specifically set out to do it.
Okay.
Well, I'm on the Roads and Right of Way Committee, and that is a big thing for the committee. So frankly, I don't think we need this recommendation, because Roads and Right of Way is all over it, and it continues to be.
Okay, good. Recommendation 6, identify all
Wait,
structures on
hang
or
on one
oh, sorry.
I'm not so sure we should just throw this away. I know roads and right of way is on this, but with the possible future redevelopment of Wilkie Square coming up, I think this might be important to keep in there, because it's all private property right down there in the commercial waterfront. And keeping this, just in the report, in the update, so they know that that's, important to people, that they do have that, because that is a major redevelopment on the commercial waterfront that's going to be happening possibly within the next 10 years before we update this again. So I'm not so sure we should just get rid of this.
Okay, I think that's a great point. This recommendation was to prepare the decision makers with information that should a proposal like you're talking about, Wilkie Square, come up, that there would be this inventory of places where the public had a scenic view and that could be disrupted by a new project. So what you're talking about, I think, is that in the review process of a new project, that the public's view of the water should be a consideration in that approval. Is that correct? In other words, it's almost two different things. This recommendation was suggesting that the town should figure out where those places are, and so that the decision makers would have that in front of them when a proposal came up. And what you're talking about is that should be used as a criteria, so that when that project comes up, amongst the zoning regulations and Chapter 91 regulations, whatever other regulations apply to it, one of the factors that should be considered is the impact on the public's view of the water.
That's correct. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
All right, if
number 5 is not addressing that, then we could get rid of it. But
we could keep it, because that could be an ongoing thing, to identify the scenic view and utilize this information in regulatory decision making. And I can wordsmith that so it makes more sense than that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think that's a good point. Was that you, Steve? We can't tell who.
Yeah, that was me.
I think it's a good point. If people are okay with that, then maybe, Jack, we just reword it to indicate we want to keep that thought in there, but not with the task that was identified back in 2009.
Okay, good. This one,
hey, Jack.
Yes.
Sorry, Jessie has her hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
and so
I don't see that as well.
And Seth
After
does
me.
too,
So who identifies these scenic view? Well, first of all, let me back up. Do we have like a map showing the geographic scope of what we're calling the commercial waterfront?
Yes. It's the harbor overlay districts in the zoning bylaw.
Okay, so it matches that exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you can make this scenic view thing anything you want, but chances are it's most relevant in the commercial waterfronts.
Okay, so there's a reference to that in this plan, that what we consider to be the commercial waterfront is the harbor overlay district. Is that?
If it's not clear, we can certainly do that.
And then my question is, who identifies the scenic views, and is this something, and where would this go? I guess, is this something we would potentially put in this plan or not? Or I'm just where does that inventory list go?
It could be in the plan if we did it now, if somebody would do it now, or as it was in 2009, this was made as a recommendation of something to be done, and I don't have it in front of me, but the matrix undoubtedly identifies some official or staff person or committee that was to do it, probably the rights of way committee.
Okay, I mean, roads and right of ways, I know they do like the whole island, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it would be good to know what they've done in the harbor overlay district. And then I would be willing to, well, it could be a really big task. But I don't know. I don't know if anyone else is interested in having a discussion about where, like, about identifying scenic views at all. But so that's my question for the rest of the members.
Yeah, there are examples of other towns having done this, and we could show you how it was done. Keep in mind that this is the harbor plan, so there's two areas of the island this harbor plan applies to: Nantucket Harbor and Mattocket Harbor. So if you were to think that this was a good recommendation for the rest of the island, it would need to be in some place other than the harbor plan, because the jurisdiction of this plan doesn't cover the whole island.
Yep.
And then this is the subsection of the harbor plan dealing with the commercial waterfront, and that's where this recommendation is. So we could make the recommendation extend to the entire planning area of the harbor plans, which is more extensive than the commercial waterfronts, if you thought that was a good idea.
Okay. Okay. So the harbor overlay district includes Mattocket Harbor, is what you're saying?
Yeah, there's one
but
there
the commercial
as well.
waterfront is really just the downtown area.
Yes, where the
Yes.
harbor, yeah. We think of it as coterminous with the harbor overlay district, but this plan covers territory greater than the harbor overlay district in both of those harbors. So you could extend this recommendation to the entire planning area of the harbor plan.
If we want, so you're saying we could make the scenic views, the map. Well, no, because this is just the commercial waterfront. I'm getting confused now.
No, but
you're
all I'm
you
saying
can't
is we
change
could,
it.
right, you could take it out of the section of commercial waterfront, make it a general recommendation for the whole harbor plan. So
Right,
like,
just
for
thank you.
example, in Nantucket downtown, the harbor overlay district doesn't go out to Brand Point. So that whole shoreline is not really covered in this, but that strikes me as a place where there's probably scenic views that you might want to protect. And the same thing going all the way down to Pulpus and so forth.
Okay, interesting. Seth is waiting.
My turn. So I think some of the problems with this recommendation is there's a bit of vagueness to what the recommendation is saying. So, like, for instance, regulatory decision makers, that could be a whole bunch of things. But speaking, like, for instance, on behalf of the Conservation Commission, we already have wetland scenic views as a protected interest of our regulations. So nobody in the town has to determine what those views are. It's the burden of applicants to show us without doubt that the views are or are not there. So any time we are reviewing a project, wetland scenic views already are part of the review process. And I think too, scenic is very subjective. Some people might like one thing and some people might not, or might like another thing. So, I think getting this list together of different places is not very helpful. I think we should just say instead prioritize enhancing and maximizing wetland scenic views as a characteristic that is important for regulatory review. And Conservation Commission isn't the only board that has say over these things. There's other local boards like HUC and planning and zoning, and there's state boards like Chapter 91. So if we just make it as an important priority in the plan, we don't necessarily need this kind of vague subjective document that you guys are talking about compiling, I think.
I agree with you, Seth. I think just making it the recommendation is important.
And then I think you would ideally revise, say, the special permit review and approval criteria to include impact on scenic views, whatever that might be. In other words, you can say this in the plan, and somebody could point to the plan and say, there's a policy in the plan or a recommendation in the plan that says protect scenic views. But if it's not part of the regulatory review process, It doesn't have any teeth. And as you point out, it is in the review of the wetland under Concom wetlands review. And all we were trying to do, or the town was trying to do with identify in advance, was so that applicants would have some idea that somebody had identified a view as being important and worth saving. If you don't do that and you go directly to the regulatory process, then everybody says, well, I think that's a really important view. That's the only difference. And I wouldn't argue either way.
I hear you. I just don't think that's equitable for somebody arbitrarily to go around the properties and say, this is an important view, but the one next door isn't. So I think that's just bad government, honestly. It should be the burden of proof should always be on applicants or project representatives to dictate the resources that they have and don't have versus other people.
Committee's call.
Yeah, I guess my only question is it more of a, so the regulatory review is more of a sort of reactionary, like someone submits an application and I'm just wondering, like the purpose of this document is more, I don't know, maybe I'm confusing, but not understanding it correctly. If it's just, I agree with the general statement, but this is more, I feel like prospective.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I don't know.
I think you understand it. It is prospective. That's what it's doing. So if you had a wetlands regulation that didn't in advance identify what a regulated wetland was, then an applicant would come along and somebody would say, well, I think that's a wetland and it should be protected. And so obviously the wetland program pre-identifies what is a wetland. And you could carry that analogy across a lot of different things, but many towns don't have this. Many times a proposal comes along and somebody goes, "You got to be kidding me! That's going to block this view from the road, and it's a beautiful view. We've had it forever." And then what do? The planning board or whoever is making the decision goes, we don't really have anything that would allow us to adjust the project to protect that view. It's just not one of the criteria that we use. But everybody's in that situation, or most places are in that situation.
May I ask a question on, I think we do such a great job on Nantucket referencing historic district, historic preservation, and I'm agreeing and being hung up on like what constitutes scenic. Is there a world in which the ethos of this goal can still exist, but more through the lens of what exists historically? Because historic, I think, is easier to quantify, where scenic, to Seth's point, is so subjective. I don't know if that makes sense, or if that's helpful at all.
It does to me. We're coming to historic, the next recommendation too. A different historic than you're talking about.
Yeah, just quickly, last thing, because I've wrapped my head around this a little bit too. The reason why like the Wetlands Protection Act works isn't because we have a list of all wetlands in the Commonwealth. It's because we have a definition of what they are and where they might be. So if we want to say something like in the commercial waterfront, views are likely scenic if they fit this definition, then that's fine. That's general enough. And then again, it's still on the applicant before a body to prove that they are or aren't. But a list, I don't see there being any benefit of the list. Thank you.
Okay, let me try to capture what people
I think what you'll do is you'll boil all this down and we'll have another crack at it, right?
Yes, exactly.
I think that, I think we've made our various points pretty clear. And you just have to sort of figure out how that can be put into words.
That's what we do.
And-
And what I probably will do is have 2 or 3 different versions of it,
Okay.
and then you can look at it.
I mean, my sense is that the entire area would be, if a building was going to be torn down or whatever, could be a potential great view. But I mean, if right now there's a building there, so you can't very well say that's a great view, but something could come up in the future where, like on Washington Street, all of a sudden you have it.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Okay, want to move on to the historic one now. The identify all structures on or adjacent to the waterfront that can be considered historic assets in the context of a working waterfront, and add them to the Historic District Commission's list of individually or contributing significant structures. And the committee noted that that hasn't been done, and but to check with the Historic District Commission. So are there buildings, structures, or sites in the commercial waterfront that are let's say, keep it at buildings that are historic, that are historic from the commercial waterfront's point of view, that might not be on the Historic District Commission's list of buildings and structures?
No, is the Stop and Shop? Because the Stop and Shop was once a, marine and lumber store before the boat basin was a tourist destination. The whole waterfront was working waterfront. So, a lot of those little shacks were fishing shacks. So, and historic structures, I mean, the West Jetty was completed in 1884. The East Jetty was completed in 1910. And while they're not building structures, there's something historic about them, certainly commercial. And Petrel Landing has had commercial uses over its history, but there's no building there. So you got some clutching at straws, but
I think the HTC has a lot of information on this, don't they? They've done surveys of, historic buildings in the downtown. I guess I would just want to know what's there first.
Yeah, I think a talk with Holly Backus would answer this pretty fast.
Okay, good. I'll talk to her then. Okay. All right, the next group comes from the Harbor Ops Safety Navigation section of the plan. The goal to provide boating environment that promotes safety and balanced uses while maintaining the character and protecting the natural resources of the harbor. Seems like a good goal. Again, any of these goals or objectives that we go over quickly, you could say, we should tweak that. It doesn't say exactly what it should say. And then the objective 5 under that was to improve harbor safety. The recommendation under that was the town should actively encourage the relocation of the current fuel offloading facility to the South Shore and the fuel storage facility tank farm to the location in the vicinity of the airport. So you guys noted that the tanks have been removed and relocated.
But not all of them.
There's 2 left.
Yeah.
Are they going to be removed,
No, because I think they fuel the fuel dock.
They're 2 brand new tanks that were just installed last year. I think they do provide the fuel just for the fuel dock. One's diesel, and I think there's 1 or 2 that are gasoline. And I think they're working on permanent permitting for those in and around that area.
I think that's correct. That's my understanding too.
Yeah.
But Steve, shouldn't this be updated? The wording of this be updated?
I don't think I'm not sure it needs to be in there. I think it's basically complete.
The committee doesn't want to do anything to the remaining tanks. They seem to be serving a waterfront purpose.
So we could just remove this recommendation?
Yes. If that's what the committee wants to do.
I think so.
Okay. Next
Okay.
goal, go ahead. Next goal, to increase the security of the harbors, ensure smooth and continued operation in the event of a significant maritime disaster, storm, or accident. Objective under that, ensure that the movement of goods and people to and from the island can continue in the event that a vessel access becomes restricted. And the recommendation under that is the town should pursue opportunities to develop a second commercial dock and so on and so forth. And I would just note that the committee mentioned that that's been attempted numerous times. I have that in the next section that we're going to talk about, where the issues that came up during the public process and the recommendations that the committee made for that. So if we could skip over that for the moment, we're going to come back to it as a new recommendation. Okay.
And that, Jack, that's Dave Franzuto's recommendation.
It
correct?
is, yes.
Okay.
And that in the next section I referred to, we're going to go over that.
Good.
The objective, next objective, ensure that boating services and infrastructure is adequate to meet the needs of boats in the Nantucket and Mattocket harbors, especially during a storm event. Recommendation 1, all efforts should be made to maintain the haul-out capacity on Nantucket at levels that will allow safe and timely removal of boats. The committee noted that was complete. And so is the recommendation still necessary? I mean, it's a good policy for sure. But I think that's picked up in the objective. So the objective would stay that the town should always do this. Is there any further efforts that are needed to make sure that that capacity exists or remains?
I think this is really important. I think a couple of people on the call will agree with me, but I mean, I've had a boat on a Nantucket mooring, one of the big boat moorings for the last 7 years. And they're like, I can remember 3, maybe 4 instances in that 7 years where Nantucket moorings came and told me I had to get off. And, Carson suggested I go to New Bedford. It was sort of like, it was, and I know that the haul out at Great Harbor, Eric Finger, I mean, was working 12 hours a day doing the best he could, and he couldn't do them all.
This is excuse me. If Dave Franzo were here, we'd be here till 3 o'clock, him talking about it. But on SHAB, on the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, we've talked about it for years and tried to, and we've all, gone on our own personal walks around the island, around the coastal areas to try and find a place where we could have another boat ramp, or could we expand the Children's Beach boat ramp, or can people haul out at Pulpus Harbor? And Pulpus Harbor is too shallow for a lot of big boats. So this is a big thing. It needs to be on here.
I agree. It needs to be on here. And I'm not quite sure once it's on here where it goes from there.
You may go somewhere if Dave Franzuto's thing gets legs and they build another multi-use pier for ferry boats and maybe another launch. But for all of us who know the island really well, can you think of a place where we could do another boat ramp? And we really couldn't. You got 2 boat ramps for various size boats in Mattocket. Who wants to go all the way to Mattocket if there's a storm? And some boats can come out of the water at Pulpus Harbor, center consoles and small sailboats, but it's really Children's Beach and Great Harbor Yacht Club. So.
Mm-hmm. So we can certainly keep the objective and the recommendation just as it is. In other words, when you go to do this, there's not going to be anything to do other than continue your efforts to make sure that the existing ways that the boats are removed from the harbor don't go away. I mean, that's.
Boy, we have a bunch of hands here, guys. I know I can't. I'll just go from top to bottom. Jesse, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm not a boater, but I think the boat ramp, has come up in all of our public sessions. People have brought that up. The island needs another boat ramp? So I guess my question, I focus on that word adequate. Is what we have adequate? It's a question, and yeah, I just put it out there.
Steve, I think you're shaking your head. Is that your answer?
My answer is that no, it is not adequate. What I was going to say is that we need to keep this in there because I know that there's no place for it right now. But as the ocean levels rise and coastal resilience plans change or may change the whole look of certain parts of the waterfront, there may be an opportunity to put another boat ramp in the future in a place where there's structures now. So I think we need to absolutely keep this in there, even though there's probably nothing that's physically going to get done right now. I think we need to keep it.
And that recommendation I could add, you said all efforts should be made to maintain, and we could say improve or increase.
I saw Seth had his hand up, but now you're not on our screen, Seth, so I can't tell.
Yeah, it was similar to what other people were saying. In my mind, this capacity has actually gotten worse since 2009. It seems like there's more boats and more events of needing to haul out because of more frequent storms and more significant storms. So maintained at the 2009 level isn't really relevant anymore. Um, I think I've mentioned some of my issues with the existing operations that exist, but I get they have their capacity issues, but I think we need to do something about capacity, whether that's a new boat ramp, a new lift, alternative technologies that we can't imagine right now, or who knows what it is. But I think, yeah, and I think it's gotten worse actually.
I just like to.
Sorry, I just have new moorings been added since 2009? Does anyone know? Or is it the same?
Don't believe so.
I don't believe a significant number have.
Okay.
We're capped by the Army.
There's a waiting, Jesse, there's a waiting list, like 5 years. So.
It's more than 5 years. I've been on since 2017 and I've moved up 10 spots and I'm now 98.
What size boat, Phil?
34.
Yeah, see that's the tough one. That's a very small number of mooring permits over 27 feet. It moves a lot quicker for the boats that are under 27 feet.
One thing I'll throw out and then we can just move on, but I have in each of the 4 storms, I have been able to at the 11th hour and maybe even closer to the 0 hour, been able to get the boat basin to let me bring my boat in. And each of those instances, there were vacant slips all around me. And so I'm wondering if there's a discussion with the boat basin and Nantucket Island Resorts as to some sort of obligation on their part, rather than just doing me a favor when they say you can go into such and such a slip. Yeah. But that's for another discussion, I think. Okay, can we move on?
Sure. The next one is the town should continue to investigate options for developing a new boat ramp at the south end of town. There are no ideal locations. You guys noted that it hasn't been done, attempted a bunch of times. This is still, from our point of view, this is still relevant, and there's would keep that recommendation, and we'll discuss it when we talk about the new proposals. So if we could hold on that for a moment. Okay.
Okay.
That was
Can I throw out
that's one of the things that the public process talked a lot about, a new boat ramp.
Can I throw out something here? And this is going to be probably pretty controversial, but would it be possible to have a recommendation for the appropriate organization in the town, and I don't know who that be, to open up the dialogue with the Army Corps of Engineers to see if there is any wiggle room at all for any increased moorings? I mean, everybody has taken this as gospel truth that you can't, we can't possibly ask them to do anything. And we have to take what they give us as the final word. And I'm just wondering, would it be possible to go back to them and say, hey, would you relook the harbor? Is there, any flexibility in adding anything?
Well, I guess if I can, I'm just gonna interrupt. To caution on that, well, I'm not opposed to asking the question. The rule structure around moorings has changed. And pretty much anywhere you moor boats, you prohibit uses like shellfishing now. And with a pretty good bubble. So you'd have to do that pretty cautiously to not, I think, close out inadvertently potential areas that people use to cohog or scallop or do things because there's moorings present.
And if I could just take what Jeff said just a little bit further from the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board perspective, that's mooring tackle dragging on the bottom, carrying up eelgrass. But now, over the last several years, the U.S. Department, let's see, the federal department, USDA,
the FDA.
Yeah, the FDA and working with our Division of Marine Fisheries has said that anywhere that there are 20 boats moored nearby, you can't dig shellfish because they believe that each one of those boats has a holding tank in it. And it's for a disaster for sewage, for black water, for gray water to enter the harbor, and then there's a health hazard. So I know Ms. Riley has working on trying to get that lifted, but now you can't go for shellfish between May 1 and December 1, west of the line going from, what is it, Monomoy over to First Point, is that right?
Yeah.
So that takes care of Hussey Shoal and
the Horseshed
and over in front of Holbert Ave and all of that, even though the Shellfish Board found out that there's only about 25, maybe 30 boats in the harbor that have all that out there in the anchorage, but they're still not seeing our way. So.
Okay.
We can.
I would also add just finally to that I don't think it's a good idea to try and increase mooring capacity because as we just discussed previously, we are already over capacity with land-based facilities. We add more boats and the storm comes and we have much more potential for boats washing up on the beach because we can't get them out. There's not enough place for people to park to get to their boats or access. So I think that it's just a capacity issue, not unlike so many other things on the island right now. It's just the way it is.
That was what I was gonna say. You took what I was gonna say.
Samantha?
Just adding, I agree with every other comment on not increasing mooring. I would also add that we have seen research from UMass Boston about microplastics in our harbor, and the largest source that they attribute that to is mooring gear. So I think if there was ever a real discussion about increasing our mooring field, we would seriously have to consider not just the impacts to eelgrass on gear, but our water quality and presence of microplastics in general. So I'm an additional vote on no more moorings.
Okay. Jack, you want to keep going?
Yes. So the next set comes out of the docks, wharves, and piers section of the 2009 plan. The goal: preserve and enhance natural resources, ability to navigate, public access, by limiting the construction of new or expansion of existing private docks, wharves, or piers. The objective: to limit the construction of new private docks, wharves, and piers, and the expansion of existing docks, wharves, private docks, wharves, and piers. First recommendation was complete. The town developed regulations language to in the zoning bylaw to prohibit the new expanded or extended private docks. So that recommendation would be removed. Complete a survey of the existing docks, wharves, and piers to ensure that the structures are all licensed under the provisions of Chapter 91.
Hey, Jack.
Yes.
Jessie has her hand up, I think, about the last one.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there an exception for commercial piers?
Yes. In the Harbor Overlay District.
There is.
Yep.
And I guess I'm interested in knowing what the definition of commercial is, because yeah, I just I don't know if it's possible to. I just want to understand that better, because I've seen a plan that to me is not really what I would consider to be commercial, but you know, they're claiming to be commercial, and it's right in the downtown. So yeah, I just wonder if maybe we can look into that a little bit.
Yes, excellent point. We had heard that too. I don't know if it's the same project that you're referring to, but at the time in 2009, this seemed straightforward enough. But yeah, so I think that what might be needed is some clarification on a commercial versus private dock. So we could change that recommendation to develop language that makes clear what a commercial dock is versus a private dock. And that would end up in the zoning bylaw, assuming town meeting would pass it.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Complete a survey of existing docks, wharves, and piers. The committee said that was 75% complete, and that we probably need to update this recommendation. So our thought was to keep it. Does anybody get some clarification to that? Who is doing that, and what's it look like? Perhaps Jeff.
Thank you.
Get all this information wherever you go, from day one till day now, through day end of this year's,
Got Jeff talking to somebody else.
No, I'm thinking about it.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
You appreciate
All right. Let me think about it a little bit. I'll send some thoughts.
That would be great. Thanks.
Later.
And then the committee can hear this again later.
Yeah, just thinking about what resources. I've actually gone into that because it's kind of piecemeal.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'll try to compile that together.
Okay. Trying to think whether we had, can't remember whether we did that for the 2009 plan or not. Well, we'll look too, Jeff. Recommendation 3, review the legal status of permit applications for private docks that have already been submitted. Committee said this was complete. We said remove.
Yeah, we don't have any active applications right now.
Okay.
For private docks.
Okay.
Except for the one that Jesse just mentioned.
Yeah,
right.
right.
A bit more.
Right. Any other thoughts?
Can you say who that is?
I don't know. That's the first I've heard of it.
Okay.
The recommendation 4, implement standards for design and construction of docks, wharves, and piers that will protect safety of people, buildings, infrastructure, in addition to natural resources, both in normal use and in the case of a significant storm. So the committee suggested that we update this for resilience. And I have a feeling when we talk about the resilience section of the plan, we'll be talking about this a little bit more. So we should probably just leave this for now. but be assured that the recommendation will talk about that. So I think the recommendation, the wording is fine. We just probably need to update it for the current thinking on the impact of sea level rise and climate change.
I have one quick question. I don't know
Sure.
if anybody has the answer to this, but is the Steamship Authority exempt to our harbor plan when they come in with their design changes for Steamboat Wharf?
They are a quasi-public agency that is subject to Chapter 91 and to the harbor plan.
Okay, thank you.
And they don't, or we know, for example, Massport has an MOU with DEP regarding Chapter 91. I don't know, nor do I think that the Steamship Authority does, but I could be wrong. But we can check that too. Recommendation 5, establish criteria to evaluate whether dock, wharf, or pier is substantially deteriorated in a process to have deteriorated docks, wharves, or piers repaired or removed. This sort of speaks to the Chapter 91 issue that you guys have brought up a number of times. Under Chapter 91, when you get a license for a dock or a pier, you're to me the condition of the license is that you maintain it, and but as a lot of other things that's not enforced very well. I don't know whether the town has criteria for evaluating deteriorating docks. The Concom must issue a license for them. I don't know what your...
Yeah, we have permitting standards to deal with those things still.
To deal with maintaining them?
Yeah.
Okay. Are they adequate, Jeff? As is?
Depends who you ask.
Yeah. It's often the case.
And we're also right now, the Concom's also in the process of doing kind of a regulatory update. So it's a little bit in flux.
Okay.
But I can send those what looks like what's the proposed regs now that I think they're pretty close to a potential vote. You can see what those look like.
Okay, that would be great. Send draft regs. Okay, good. So that's the matrix of the policies and recommendations regarding the commercial waterfront. Now, the next piece is titled Commercial Waterfront. Which is 2 columns, 2023 issues, and then suggested solutions and recommendations. So what this piece is what we heard from the committee, from the public, from the survey, from our interviews, what people thought the issues should be taken up in this harbor plan. And then on the right-hand column, some suggested solutions, some of which we also heard people offer during the public process, and some of which we came up on our own. So do you want to start on that list now? And this gets to some of the things that we put up that we just tabled as well. Some of the things Dave Frunzuta was talking about. So we ready for this?
Sure.
So I think, Jack, I think our schedule, try to wrap this up by 2:30.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, we'll certainly do our best. Yes, the meeting will be over at 2:30, and we'll see how far we can get. Is that what you meant? Yeah. So the first one, provide further clarity for all permitting at waterfront sites, particularly in the Harbor Overlay District, regarding water-dependent uses and essential services. Yeah, so this again goes back to the thing that I spoke about, that the planning and land use section of the planning department said that there was some issues. And so I guess we just need to find out what those issues are, and we'll make some proposals to address those issues. Second one, investigate ways to assist with, participate, or otherwise determine how local mechanisms can be used to enforce Chapter 91 licensing and permitting decisions. And related to that, better enforcement measures or consequences of if local permit conditions regarding operations are not fulfilled. And then another one, need more funding enforcement. So these are all things that somebody said during the process. So the options for doing that, and I think you're all familiar with what that issue was, that DEP in the community's mind doesn't enforce sufficiently, and that the community really wanted to see if there was some way that the community could participate in that monitoring and enforcement. The answer from DEP was, no, we don't have any ability to delegate that enforcement. So a couple of suggestions: lobby DEP to delegate some enforcement authority. That's probably, we could do that. It's a longer term, probably, proposition. Then a question I have is, do local planning and Concom decisions mirror Chapter 91 license conditions? In other words, when Chapter 91 is issued by DEP, they have in their hand the zoning decision, because they want to know what this community has done when they're writing their decision. But to the extent it's possible to know this, does the planning decisions and the Concom decisions incorporate the kinds of things that the Chapter 91 license is looking for? The point of this is, if the two decisions were consistent, then while you can't enforce DEP's licensing conditions, you certainly can enforce the Conservation Commission's decisions or the Planning Board's decisions, because the same material is in those local decisions. So that's how, in effect, you would be enforcing Chapter 91 licensing conditions. So I don't know that. I don't know whether you do that or not. Does that sound like it's possible? In other words, if there's a new waterfront development, Chapter 91 is going to issue a license. Does the planning board attempt to write special permit conditions that reflect what the Chapter 91 license is saying?
Seth has his hand up.
Okay, Seth.
I don't have an answer to that question, but I do want to weigh in about how the permitting structures interact, because potentially not for new permits, but for existing permits, we get an issue coming into the Conservation Commission all the time where a property has a Chapter 91 license structure that like hasn't been maintained or is seeking major repair. And they're essentially saying that they're required to repair it because their Chapter 91 license requires them to do that, even though we have local regulations in the Conservation Commission that essentially forbid them from repairing it without providing an alternatives analysis to use more environmentally friendly technologies. And permit applicants repeatedly refuse to do this or won't do it to the appropriate scale because they're saying we can't agree to that because Chapter 91 is compelling us to do what's in the license. So it is kind of like agencies working against each other sometimes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, they could, I mean, that's a little disingenuous because they could apply to DEP for a new license.
Yeah, I mean, we've told them that they could get a license amendment or a new license, but people don't really want to do that is the problem.
I can well imagine. All right, that's a good one.
So kind of the opposite of that, is there a way, like, I know sometimes at the town level anyway, like, sometimes permits, like if someone has outstanding, an outstanding issue with another, with HTC, or like, can you say, well, condition, like could the Concom, I mean, I'm guessing the answer is no, otherwise this would already be done. Could the Concom condition, an order based on, provided that they comply with their Chapter 91 conditions and continue to comply, as time, and that, I'm wondering if you can kind of bootstrap with existing local regulatory processes,
I mean, I don't want to talk about this a ton in this forum, and I'll defer to Jeff here maybe, but yeah, I mean, we could certainly put requirements in like that, but ultimately who is determining compliance is DEP. So we don't have the authority to go to properties per se and look for Chapter 91 non-compliance. Only DEP can do that. So it's
But that would make them not compliant with your order if your order says it, and you know what I mean? So wouldn't that in a way give you local enforcement power? I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, we probably have to talk to council about that, but maybe, yeah.
It's Seth, you could. You could go to, you could identify chapter 91 violations, you just couldn't enforce them, so you could then move it up the chain and report it to DEP and get them to do it, right?
I'm not sure. I'll defer to Jeff, but we don't have the power to go on to properties to assess a chapter 91 violation, right? Unless they have a permit with the Conservation Commission. We can't just go to random properties and look for violations. Is that true, Jeff?
Jeff stepped out to go pick up kids at school, and he was
Okay.
gonna try and come back, so he may or may not be back.
Anyway, sorry, but we can talk more about this later, but there's limited opportunities for us to like inspect properties and issue or look for violations on properties unless their permitting is somehow tied to local permitting. So it really depends. And just generally too, I would say that I think doing the doing the parallel processes that some type of local control was created is a lot smoother and less regulatory and legally challenged rather than trying to tie permitting between state and town boards together. I think creating an alternate local structure is just a lot cleaner. I mean, that's what we do with our Nantucket wetland regulations. Yes, the WPA, the Wetlands Protection Act, affects the whole state, but there's Nantucket regulations that only affect Nantucket, and those can be stricter than what the state says. It just can't be less strict. So I think there's ways to make it done entirely at the local level.
Local level, okay. I think one of the projects that people, I don't know if this was causing an issue, but when Great Harbor Yacht Club didn't put in the fueling facility or took it out, I guess, or something, doesn't do it, and it was the condition of the Chapter 91 permit, a license, and I think some in the community very much liked the idea that there was a fueling facility there. But you can't do anything about it. They just stopped doing it. And DEP doesn't seem inclined to do anything about that. So it's those kind of issues, I think.
Yeah.
So that's why we were talking about if what was in the Chapter 91 license as conditions were also in the local conditions, then, and if the town wanted to pursue that, they could under their own regulatory jurisdictions.
Right. I mean, they'd basically be non-compliant with the local order by not being compliant with the, but I get it that maybe that's adding more to.
No, I just, for clarity here too, the order of permit isn't always the same. So somebody could apply for a Conservation Commission permit with intent to apply for a Chapter 91 license later, get a Conservation Commission permit without having their Chapter 91 license in place, and then with the hopes of later getting their Chapter 91 license. But sometimes they end up never getting that Chapter 91 license. And then when they come to get a certificate of compliance, they could just say, we did all the work except for this one thing. It doesn't matter. So, you could end up getting your Chapter 91 license 3 to 6 years after you got a Conservation Commission permit. So it's sometimes possible to have it always in the order of conditions.
No, I think I'm just like, trying to think outside the box because obviously the messages that we're sending up there are falling on deaf ears and I'm not, so.
It sounds like in order to do what we're talking about, we'd have to, and probably not in the plan, or maybe the plan could suggest it that into creating bylaw that would parallel them.
Yeah, all right, well, let us give us.
Maybe we can make that recommendation in our plan. Doesn't mean anyone's gonna act on it, but it means, you know, it means we
Okay.
put our thoughts down on paper.
Yep. Okay. Well, again, like the other thing, let me try some language and we'll bring it back to you. Another issue, concern with losing essential support service for fishers and boaters. Is there a way to incentivize or require certain specific uses? And this was the Chandlery question on the harbor of the town. Ways to promote, protect certain water dependent uses, a possibility of additional incentives. The town, so in the harbor overlay district, there's a list of water dependent uses that the town claims that it would very much like to see in any project. It's voluntary, but it said if you're looking for a water dependent use that the town would like, here's a list. And Chandlery is one of them, along with a whole number of other things. But you know, the proponent would have to decide that that's what they want to do. They want, in other words, if a waterfront property in the harbor overlay district was to be redeveloped, and these days it's probably going to be redeveloped for a non-water dependent use, but they need to incorporate some water dependency in that project. So they could select from the uses that are in there. So in that sense, your regulation always is also already pointing out to them what it is that the town would like to see done in a general sense. So we could do something there. There's a possibility of doing some substitutions and amplifications in the harbor plan that provide guidance to DEP when it's issuing a Chapter 91 license about, and this would be an amplification for most part, about what it is that the town would like to see in any Chapter 91 license. So if there was a chandlery on the site and the owner has the ability to make another proposal, as long as it was a water dependent use, and come up with something else. But the town could, one of the amplifications could be the town really would like to maintain these types of uses or something. It's not prescriptive, but it would be guidance to DEP. That's what it amounts to.
Do you think there's a way, Jack, to restrict that particular place? Like, let's of course take Brant Point Marine, and I think we know through the grapevine that there's going to be a ship chandlery type business there. I think I heard for the next 5 years, and then who knows what happens after that. So is there a way to, I guess that would be a special circumstance where you work with the property owner and get them to restrict it, deed restrict it, so that in perpetuity it's always that. I don't know if that's possible legally.
Yeah, what we tried to do with the harbor overlay district was to create a situation where the allowed uses were somewhat limited to largely to water dependent uses, but other things could happen there. So in doing that, using the zoning regulations to really limit what somebody could do on a property. So that chandlery has, that 5-year chandlery that you're talking about has the ability to make a application to the town boards to do something else on that property. It's in the harbor overlay district, so it's limited to what those options are, but there are options. So what you're talking about, Peter, is the other way of doing it, using sort of the private marketplace, the deed restrictions to do it. And like you say, the property owner would have to just agree to do it. Probably wouldn't be a very good
could these regulations apply to future redevelopment of waterfront, like down in Wilkie Square? I mean, there was a chandlery there for years, and then there wasn't. But when they go to redevelop all that, could this affect what goes in there possibly?
I mean, assuming what they're going to propose to do is allowed by the zoning bylaw, and then if it's in this harbor overlay district, there'll be a requirement that they do something water dependent there. So the town could say, the cities do this all the time. They really begin to bargain. They say, okay, we could imagine giving you this density that you're looking for, but we want something for that. And what we want is we want you to maintain a chandelier on the site, something like that. It's a bargaining thing. As long as it's allowed, you know, it's all in the within the bounds of the regulations, you bargain for it.
Getting back on the bar wagon. Can we, I think this is a really important section. Really important. And I would love to, because I think it's gonna, I want to get my thoughts together on it, and we're gonna revisit it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because I have a document somewhere where I remember reading like all the different things that can be included in this. So I guess it would be helpful if you could, is it possible to give us like a list of all the different types of things? Just to give the committee a idea of, you know, what we're talking about.
When you say list, you mean all the different alternatives for how to do this?
Oh, I guess yeah. Oh, this is just on the, okay, I thought this was, so this is just, so like so you say a chandlery or a marine supply store, or some other like a water recreational business or,
Yep.
Yeah, I guess I'm just interested in knowing, because I know that there's other sections that maybe this is not the same as which prioritize certain, is it just water dependent, or is there, you can specify, because thought I saw somewhere, and this is, I don't know if this is something I would recommend or suggest, but I like things even that are not water dependent related, like if it was important for the community to create more affordable housing in this area, like something like if that's a high community priority. I mean, there are other things, right, that you can put that are in the commercial area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the Harbor Overlay District is just an overlay to the existing zoning. So there is zoning in place on these sites. Some of it allows residential, some of it allows a variety of commercial activities, not necessarily water dependent. But what we were trying to do with the Harbor Overlay District is saying, well, you can do what the underlying zoning allows you to do, but you need to incorporate public access or some manner of water dependent use in the project. And there's a geographic area around the edges of docks and piers and along the waterfront where you really have to be water dependent. So it's not like, I'll do water dependent, but it'll be 200 feet inland. It'll be on the waterfront. So, but the overlay district works with the underlying zoning. You can do what the underlying zoning says, but you also have to comply with what the Harbor Overlay District says, which basically adds a set of criteria for water dependency. But it doesn't do away with the residential that's allowed on the property or the commercial that might otherwise be allowed on the property.
Thanks, Kim. Kim, it's now 2:30, and we are on number 3 of, I see 13 items. So I suggest you put your little note in there that where we stopped. And I don't know whether we want to decide whether we had finished our discussion on number 3 or not. What do you think, Jack? I mean, you've heard a lot. Maybe you can, with your magic, you can boil that down to a recommendation or something.
Yep. We'll do that. So when we come back, we'll have in all of this material, we're coming back to it. So what you're giving us now is some direction on what we're going to do when we come back.
But this is really important stuff, because this is all the feedback we were getting from our meetings and everything. And
right, exactly.
I think this is a really good exercise, and we should give it the time it deserves.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Why don't I try to be more specific in the recommendations?
Okay. So Kim, our next meeting will start at number 4.
Yep, that sounds good.
I think what you guys did, Kim, is really helpful. If you remember to bring it to your meetings, where you actually print out each one of these sections and had the old recommendations. I find this really helpful. And I don't know, have you done this for the other categories too? Or I think I saw something here for administrative and coordination.
Yeah, we've done it for all the big topics. So Jack will likely get into administration and coordination next time. I think after that, we're going to talk about water quality.
Okay, so we're moving in the right direction.
Yep.
Is that okay? Can we wrap things up at 2:30 now, guys, or 2:34?
Right.
Sounds good.
Okay, I guess we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second.
Second,
Okay, all in favor? Peter,
Aye.
Steve,
aye.
Seth,
Aye.
Jesse,
Aye.
Samantha,
I
and I vote aye. We are, meeting is over.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Ciao.
Thanks.
So Samantha, what's our next meeting?
It's February 5th at 1 o'clock.
Samantha, you're the meeting host. I mean, Kimberly is. Or
Yeah,
Sam-
should be. I can sign out. But yeah, the next meeting is February 5th.
So can you make sure that you stop recording?
Yes. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.